So in Module 4, we're concerned about tracking progress. How do project managers keep track of things? And the two things they're most interested in is schedule, meaning are we getting this done on time, and how much is it costing me? And so the metrics they use to measure this are basically based on PV, EV, and AC. Now, in all honesty, this can get kind of confusing. Wait, which is which? And what it comes down to is, how do you measure progress through a project? How do you compare it to something else? And so what you do is you use a number. And so PV is, what's my plan value? So if I'm spending $500,000, then when I'm halfway through this, ideally I should have spent $250,000. EV is earned value, meaning how much have you gotten done? And so that is a percentage, and you could do it one way or the other. For example, out of 500,000, I get 25% done. That means that 125,000 is EV. On the other hand, if I was told EV is 125,000, I could do it backwards also. So 125,000 divided by 500,000 tells me 25% is done. AC is the actual cost. How much money have I actually been spending? And another important number is BAC. BAC is budgeted completion, meaning the budget is 500,000. So what can we do with these numbers? We can figure out indices, and these indices tell us whether or not we're doing well or not doing well by just looking at one number. So SPI, or Schedule Performance Index, if it's greater than 1, that means we're ahead of schedule. If we're equal to 1, we're on schedule. And if we're below 1, then we're in trouble. We're behind schedule. Same thing for Cost Performance Index. If we're greater than 1, we're over budget. If we're equal to 1, we're on budget. If we're less than 1, then we're in trouble. And so essentially, these are the equations. The SPI is equal to the earned value versus the planned value. So if my earned value, meaning how much I'm getting done, is greater than my planned value, then that means I'm ahead of schedule. And the same thing goes for Cost Performance Index, meaning if I have more done and it's greater than how much I'm actually spending, then that means CPI is going to be greater than 1, and that's a good thing. So what you need to do is look at these equations. Now, why are there so many different equations for EAC? And a lot depends on how much information you have available. If you have limited information available, then you would use these values of EAC. On the other hand, if you have everything, then this is the most accurate one. And the reason why is, when we think of what if SPI and CPI are in conflict with each other, meaning I'm ahead of schedule, but I'm over budget. So SPI is greater than 1 and CPI is less than 1. How do you reconcile that? And the thing about these equations is they don't tell you everything that's going on. And so that's why you plug it into here to get a more accurate answer. Another important term is to Complete Performance Index, TCPI. And what TCPI is basically saying, based on the remaining work you have to do, how much money do we have? And this is important because it tells you, am I going to run out of money? And if I'm going to run out of money, that means I have to go start talking to people and get money back. I'm going to do one sample problem with the multiple choice questions. So we have a chart here. And what this comes down to is these questions are testing you to see, do you conceptually understand what CPI, SPI, PV, EV, what does it all mean? Not just plug into an equation, but do you understand what it means? And so this graph shows the performance of a project. It's 60% done, and we're here. Line A shows the work performed so far. So that's the blue line. Line B shows the plan budget. the plan budget is the orange line, and line C, which is the gray line, shows how we're doing on cost. And so when we look at this, what does the value of the work performed so far? That's basically our EV. This is going to be our PV, and this is our AC. So based on this, we can calculate all kinds of different things. So what do these curves tell you? Well, the big thing you see is what happens early on here. Well, it looks like we're right on budget. And then what happens is that, we're behind schedule. Because if everything was perfect, everything would be on the same line, but it's not. And then all of a sudden, we start spending more and we go over budget. But if you notice, what is also happening is that we start catching up schedule and we actually get ahead of schedule. So if you want to make this perfect, what would probably happen is this would start to come down and this would come down and we get on schedule, but everything would start to align. So what do these curves tell you? The PM saw that they were falling behind schedule, so the PM leveled his resources. Now what this is testing is, do you remember what leveling means or what crashing means? So leveling is when I have 10 hours, 14 hours, 11 hours, and so I only have 8 hours. So that means I have to flatten it out. The problem with doing that is I still have to work all those hours. Where are all those hours going? Well, odds are I'm probably going to end up having to tack it to the end of the schedule. So my schedule gets longer, but I maintain budget. However, there's no proof of leveling in those curves. So the PM was ahead of schedule. Well, right away you know that's false because we were never ahead of schedule and accelerated spending to finish early. At month 6, CPI was 1 and SPI was 1.2. Well, if CPI was 1 here, that's probably correct because we were right on budget. On the other hand, SPI was 1.2, which would say we're ahead of schedule, and we know we're not ahead of schedule here. So that's wrong. The PM saw they were falling behind schedule and decided to crash the schedule. And what's crashing the schedule? Try to shorten the schedule up by spending money. And that's how they got ahead of schedule. All right, a lot of people have told me, this has nothing to do with the book. But the book explains what it is, but it's up to you to understand what it means. I mean, there is some thinking that goes on in this. And so this is what I mean by conceptual thinking. If you understand what these actually mean, then you can solve problems like this. Okay, let's look at some of the written problems. And this one is pretty short. So we have a budget of 500,000. So what does that budget mean? That's my BAC, right? Budget at the end, 500,000. And this is supposed to go 6 months. At the end of 3 months, we spent 350,000 and 30% of the work is completed. So what do we know? When we know PV, what's the plan value? So we want to know what's going on at 3 months. So at 3 months, we know that we plan to spend only 250,000 based on what this is. What's AC? Well, it tells us we actually spent 350,000 and 30% of the work, the planned work completed. So 30% times 500,000 means that I have an earned value of 150,000. So plug and chug. You can figure out SPI and CPI. Now the hard one is the AC. I have SPI, I have CPI, I have AC, I have EV. So what I need to do is use the big equation to figure out what's going on. Not so bad. Okay, this one, there's a little bit of a red herring in this. And so here it shows the months, and this is supposed to go out a year. And they're in month 8. And this is my cost. This is my earned value. And this is my budget. And so the first thing they want you to do is figure out SPI and CPI at month 8. So at month 8, you know how much you're spending, you know what the earned value is, and you know what the budget was, and you know what BAC is here. The BAC at the end is you have planned to spend $100,000 on this. So first question, pretty straightforward. And that's the thing about these questions that I give you. If you notice, they get harder the further along you get, because I'm just warming you up. Okay, what about SPI and CPI for each month of the project? And so what you need to do is actually look at month 1, look at month 2, and so you're going to have a whole table. And the reason why you do this is that you want to look at, there's cumulative SPI and CPI. That's what you calculated in this one at month 8. However, month by month, how is CPI and SPI changing? Because it gives you an idea of how well you're doing. And evidently the costs are way above what the budget is. So you know, always do a sanity check. Anytime you do a calculation, take a moment, take a step back and say, does this make sense? And in this case, it does make sense. Now, it's asking you, where did it go wrong? And so you would be looking at these numbers and saying, okay, where did this really go off track? Now, TCPI, here it is. You have BAC, you have EV, and you have AC. Just tell which one you're doing. And you know how to calculate EAC, and we did it in the problem before. Not too bad, is it? If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'm sorry about the tardiness of this, but I gave you an extension to make up for it. Take care, everyone.